And I'm going to share my screen. All right. Can you all see my screen all right? And all right. So welcome to this event. You are here and we're going to start now. Yeah, welcome to the Dark History of PM. I think many of you are here because of the title. Of course, we are so excited. We just looked at the slides. I am dying to get Rachel, and we'll get through this part really quickly. Code of, oh, I'll pass it on to Josh. Hey, Josh.
Hey everyone. Thanks for joining us tonight. It's as Ritika said, I'm very excited about the workshop and really excited to get to Rachel. But before we do that, I really wanted to acknowledge that we are privileged to organize and host this event from the traditional and unceded territory of the Coast Salish peoples, including the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. So definitely appreciate that and are excited for the event. And one more thing before we get going, just a code of conduct for tonight. You know, we definitely want to provide a fun, safe experience for all of you, regardless of gender identity and expression, sexual orientation, ability, physical appearance, body size, race, or religion. We definitely won't tolerate any harassment of participants. So if you break these rules, you'll be asked to leave and could be barred from future events. And we do have tight security on these calls. So please respect that. And also we are recording. So, you know, at this point, obviously, if you're, feeling, comfortable about sharing within that, it's great. We also maybe have some time afterwards. And we didn't talk to Ritika about this, but afterwards for further discussion. So just be aware of that and feel free to participate as much as you feel comfortable doing so.
Totally. And chat is also available if
it is.
You don't want to speak up, chat will not be recorded. Housekeeping, please keep up to date your Zoom with your city preferred pronouns. We're recording, like we said, it's going to be interactive. It's a workshop, so please use your raise hand feature. Come on video, we want to see you. I know it's the end of day. We're zoomed out, but yes, we'd love to see you and please participate. Chat is the most fun place to be, and it's going to might get very heated as we get going. So definitely keep discussion, but do keep the presenter in mind as well. So we respect Rachel. All right. We have a website. Come to the website. We post all the recorded events on there. Join us on Slack. So we have around 1,000 people now since the pandemic. We had a big uptake for sure. These are the most popular channels I'm looking for is definitely one of them. We post all kinds of opportunities, talk about all things PM. It's a really fun place to be when we're not at these events. And now I'll pass it on to our sponsors, Trav.
Hey everyone. So I'm Travis from Louder Than 10. We teach people in digital agencies, teams, and product studios how to run more profitable, sustainable, and democratic companies through digital project management and operations training. So the systems and practices that have the biggest impact on the health of an organization, its people and community, are mostly based on extractive command and control structures of the first industrial revolution and even slavery, as you'll see tonight. So we want to change that. And so a big part of that is resetting the balance of power who actually work at the organizations and help run your company. So we want to help you do that more ethically, sustainably, democratic. So we developed our curriculum.
Whose ball is that? It's not yours.
For
sorry.
digital
Can we ask everyone to mute, please? Some background noise and we want to hear Trav. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks. So yeah, we developed our curriculum for digital agencies and our industry.
Okay. Oh, no.
Oh, I'm muted now. Okay. So we design our programming for the software industry, digital agencies, client services, and we have programs from 3 to 8 months, custom training, people for all levels, whether you're a new project manager or you actually own an agency. So get in touch and we'll help sort you out.
Awesome. Thanks, Trav. Sorry we muted you. We're trying to mute everyone else. Please mute yourselves. Thank you. Our other gold sponsor is PMI. They've been a long-time sponsor with us as well. They offer the PMP that many of you are familiar with. They're a US-based, not-for-profit professional organization for project management. So we're really happy to have them and make these events come to life. We're also a fully remote volunteer-based team. We do two things really well, and we've been doing it for the last 8 years, throw on monthly events, and we've not stopped during the entire pandemic, and have a really awesome Slack community. So definitely join us there. A lot of people have met really wonderful opportunities and connections there, so join us. And of course, your org, if you would like to elevate the PM community, come chat with us. We'll put the email down in chat, so come chat with us. This year, we've also been really excited to be able to offer some donations to the community. And so we were able to make donations to these really amazing organizations as a gift on behalf of the speakers we've had throughout the year. So thank you for our sponsors for that. And now, without further ado, let's get into it. So we're at intros. We're a bit over time. That's all right. We'll make it up. Oops. Oh my God. And then we'll go to the workshop, and then we'll chat a little bit about our event, our next events, and then we'll wrap and have you done by 7. So this is some of the answers that you all wrote to the question, what is a current pain point in your org, something you would like to change about your workplace to improve equity? We picked out some of the answers and some of the themes that we saw. I'm new to this area. I will sorry guys. I'm new in this area. I will contribute with more ideas later. That is a very valid place to be, and it's all about learning, making sure all voices are heard, not just the loudest or most senior. It's not theoretical. It is a reality in our workplaces. It has a real effect on our team members. Yes, that's why we're here today. Definitely agree. Yeah, I'm gonna keep reading these. White, male dominant org, recruit for more diversity and appeal to a broader range of folks. Definitely will be going into the history of PM there. Overworked team causing burnout, leading to many people leaving or quitting. And we definitely saw that in the last year with the Great Resignation, as we call it. Yeah, I feel like this is a great segue into our workshop, our spotlight for the night. And I'm really happy to introduce Rachel today. And I'll stop sharing and we'll do a transfer. Hey, Rachel.
Hi, everyone. Hi, Ritika. Nice to be here.
All right. You are on spotlight.
All right, let's do this. Okay, everyone. So we only have a little over an hour to talk through this kind of stuff. It's a massive topic, and we don't have time to get into the weeds, but we do have a ton of resources for you to share afterwards if you're curious about reading up and you want any more information. But what I want to say to you today is that we are going to do some incredible work, and you can transform your workplace into a more democratic environment with your skills as a project leader. So that's a pretty hefty promise. And I want to expound upon that a little bit more by talking about the fact that we spend about 40% of our time at work. I was looking this up, and in the US, folks, especially in professional services, they spend about 50 hours a week at work. And we're probably also thinking about work in the shower, right? So maybe an additional 20% of our time, maybe we're going to bed thinking about it, waking up thinking about it. Work is where you have the most power to make change, right? Think about it this way. You spend a lot of your time there, you think about it a lot, but also you are in probably a project management position of some sort, right? Or a leadership position. And your PM position is actually designed to manage the flow of revenue and labor to keep the company lights on. So when you're leading process change that focuses on democratic principles of consent, agency, and trust. What this means is basically you can move your workplace into a more democratic society. I want to say this and I want this to sit. We fight to death for democracy in our government. We're literally fighting to death right now for that. But the work environment that we spend most of our waking hours in are designed like dictatorships. So let's change that. The next thing I wanted to say is that I'm going to give a slight content warning because we will be talking about some pretty heavy topics, including slavery and scientific management. People are actively experiencing harm in society because of these same systems. So I just want to acknowledge that. And also to give you hope that what we're going to cover today is going to give you some actionable things that you can walk away with to help you make change in your organization. The other thing that I want to highlight is that I'm a white cis female speaking on systems of oppression. I acknowledge my privilege, and I acknowledge that I'm a single voice drawing on the work of other authors. Some of those include Donald Nightingale, Audre Lorde, Tema Okun, Cornel West, David Graeber, Richard D. Wolff, Marjorie Kelly, and Caitlin Rosenthal. All of these resources will be shared with you folks afterwards. So let's get into it. When we talk about slavery, it is a very long, dark history. Slavery was a quota-based system. As you can kind of see on this graph here, there is a lot of data being drawn from Black folks that were kidnapped, they were shipped overseas, they were treated and sold as property, they were enslaved and had no rights and no autonomy. They had to meet quotas, or they would be beaten, traded, or killed. They were treated as chattel. And these were men, women, and children, all assigned different values based on their labor output. So there is a beautiful book called Accounting for Slavery, and we have links to these books that you can check out by Caitlin Rosenthal. And her whole point was that data was everything. Over time, benchmarks started to show a baseline for how much every hand could pick and how those who couldn't meet it would be punished. One group would actually generate the data, and then the other group began relying on that data to try to push up production. It's really similar now to how we use concepts of gamification, except that we are oftentimes willing participants in that system and enslaved peoples were not. Slave owners used inhumane incentives to increase planter picking, and then enslaved folks were subdivided into classes that encouraged them to increase their pace. Put another way, slavery is systems entirely fueled on capitalism, and racism was a very convenient way to justify its existence. Slave owners were businesses generating revenue and managing resources using the lives of humans. And slave owners generated wealth year over year over year at the expense of the Black folks that they enslaved. In addition to these types of records, you can also see that they would track meticulous records of prices assigned to each of the people at slave markets, and they kept depreciation data on age, gender, and health so that they could actually track the value of each of these people. The titles of the people that were gathering these records, they weren't called project managers. They didn't have these titles till much later in the 1950s, when there was an entire shift on how we look at what project management is actually called. At the time, there were free bookkeepers and accountants, and those folks worked and were employed by plantations and companies. But the folks that were actually indentured were called head drivers, head watchmen, and they were oftentimes enslaved. I think what we need to do is sit in that for a moment. They were enslaved folks driving other enslaved folks to do things that would increase productivity. And that should feel uncomfortable, right? Because essentially what we're saying is an early project management role was to help support a system of oppression like this. And when we look at that, there is a famous quote by Audre Lorde, who's an American poet, essayist, and autobiographer. And she said, "The master's tools will never dismantle the master's house." We designed these tools for this purpose, right? We designed tools to help us be more productive because we needed some way to logically increase production, right? It's difficult to use those tools in other ways without doing similar kinds of harm. So if you think about things like Tema Okun's work on the connection to white supremacy at work, we show up at work with concepts of perfectionism, urgency, individuality, our own right to comfort as white folks, and often toxic positivity or other ways that this still shows up. But Caitlin Rosenthal, who wrote the Accounting for Slavery book that I referenced earlier, she talked quit, right? So circumstances now are quite different, but what she's saying is that it should make people think and ask, what were we measuring? What were these measurements designed to reveal? If we have created this kind of data and we're measuring against these pieces, then those are not designed to protect or support enslaved people or help other folks become humane managers. They're designed to help maximize value, and they're designed to help surveil human capital. So if you want to use those for different purposes, it's going to be really difficult to do that, right? Because the first thing that you think about when you're actually trying to use certain types of tools and processes and systems is about productivity and profitability. So let's talk a little bit more now about what our operating system looks like at work. And when I say operating system at work, basically we're looking at maximizing financial gain and minimizing financial loss, right? So Marjorie Kelly wrote another book called Owning Our Future and highlighted the fact that corporations have two core goals. So the first one is to maximize profit, and the second is to minimize risk. And the thing about this is that when you look at it at a distance, it doesn't seem like that could be harmful, right? It feels like, yeah, of course, we want to make sure that our company is successful and it runs and it needs profit in order to distribute that, to grow the company and to minimize risk. But we just don't want to put our company through the ringer, so we have to look after it. But basic economics often actually leaves humans out of that equation entirely, right? We're not even considered in that equation. So we actually become cogs in that machine because the system is designed to exclude us in that way. I think, again, just to state it, a project manager's responsibility comes back to maximizing profit and minimizing risk, right? So again, it kind of ties right back to modern day management of corporations and companies, trying to make sure that our companies are successful and healthy. We're following a script. We're following some rules now. Slavery was officially abolished in 1865, but these systems of oppression have actually taken on new names and formats, right? We're still using data to track humans for maximum profit and productivity. You know, it is difficult, as Upton Sinclair would say, to get a man to understand something when his salary depends on his not understanding it, right? It is very uncomfortable for us to be thinking about this. And I want to make sure that you know that we're going to talk about ways that we have power in those systems. So let's frame this through the lens of how things evolved from slavery to what we call the principles of scientific management. So back in the early 1900s, everyone was really clamoring to invent something new, right? Like the Industrial Revolution of the 1800s led to a lot of changes. So we had Ford's assembly line, we had vacuum cleaners, airplanes, razors, we invented instant coffee, all kinds of things. So take a look at this guy over here. How many of you folks recognize that face? That is Henry Gantt. You might recognize him as the Gantt chart inventor. He was a mechanical engineer. He was a management consultant out of Maryland, and he is known for inventing the Gantt chart. Although there is another gentleman who technically invented it earlier, he just didn't get it to market fast enough. Henry Gantt thought that it would be very beneficial to owners and workers if they could be more productive. And he sort of saw this as a way of moving away from concepts of enslavement and slavery so that he could see owners and workers doing more, getting more out of their company, but without maybe that nasty history to lean on, right? So his tools were used on large projects like the Hoover Dam and the Interstate Highway. But did you know that Henry Gantt was also a slaveholder? His father owned 66 men, women, and children. And so he was part of this larger movement during the early 1900s called scientific management. And that is all about analyzing workflows to find the most efficient production processes. And that would help labor productivity increase, efficiency increase. And again, those principles are still in practice today. So Gantt and other management consultants, they tried to design these systems that kind of ended up dehumanizing people into economic units. So it went from how slavery functioned into what we call carrot and stick management, where folks essentially could still be paid slave wages and live and work in slavery-like conditions. But now they might introduce something like a task and bonus system. So, hey, if you work faster and harder, you can earn more money. But the thing is that it actually ended up being that they would use that to baseline the fastest workers. The fastest workers would become normalized, and then they would actually, anyone else who didn't meet those quotas would basically be penalized. They'd have to sometimes pay their wages back, all kinds of stuff, right? So this is like a system, a tool that we're using right now in project management. I'd be super curious in the chat to find out if how many folks are actually using Gantt charts right now. So early utilization metrics basically summarize the idea that we have a certain number of hours available. We have a certain amount of outputs that we have to create to on the flip side, create value. And so all of this was taking humans and turning humans into units. And I think that's what's really important here. So let's move on and talk a little bit more now about how our current systems are set up in the workplace. Donald V. Nightingale of Workplace Democracy, another fantastic book if you folks are looking for a great read, he wanted to talk a little bit about how democratic Canadian workplaces are actually changing how we show up for human sustainability. It's like making things a lot more easy on us. And in the book he wrote about Irving Bluestone. So Irving was an American trade leader at General Motors in the 1970s. And Irving said that our workplace is probably the most authoritarian environment in which the adult finds himself. Its rigidity and denial of freedom leads people to live a double life. At home, they enjoy substantially the autonomy and self-fulfillment of free citizens, and at work, they are subject to constant regimentation, supervision, and control of others. So, of course, we're starting to think now, what kind of power do we have at work? And it might kind of bring up some almost, comical thoughts like, oh, well, is it really that bad right now? Like, has anyone watched The Office Space, or not The Office Space, Office Space, which is a movie that is out of the 90s, which still holds true for me today in terms of what the summary of modern working conditions are. But let's think about time tracking, for example, right? Punch cards for factory workers, remote work. We've reduced our commute. We've reduced our commute to work, but we're actually working more now before and after work. We are using time tracking apps. Sometimes employers are installing surveillance apps on home computers to track our productivity or track our typing and what we're actually entering into our keyboards. In 2006, there's actually a survey that found out that more than a third of companies with workforces of over 1,000 had staff members who read through employees' outbound emails. Time is our currency, right? And if we think about issues with time tracking, what ends up happening is we create faulty data because we're not usually entering that data incorrectly. We're entering it in later. We're lowering the amounts because we don't want anyone to think that we're not working hard enough. This creates a reset for the baseline, and it creates false expectations. It also punishes workers, right? Why did you take so long on that task? And it limits our creativity. So another way to kind of think about this is that we have this tyranny of work. Tyranny of work is a concept that you are kind of born to work. Work is your identity, and you have no control or say in what that looks like or how it happens. And so when you think of Office Space, this should kind of bring to mind the concept that the whole movie is Peter trying to escape from this boss who is literally surveilling him constantly. So let's look at then, what is this all about? We're talking about three main things, right? Coercion, control, and surveillance. It's 8 bosses asking you about your TPS report covers. What does it look like in your own work environments? Maybe it's not this bad, maybe it's different for you. But what we want to move into is thinking about how we can connect these ideas together. I did so much research for this workshop. I was reading a bunch of PMI articles, and I wanted to kind of look at things like the Manhattan Project and the Challenger Mission Project, and just find out what are people saying about the history of some of these folks. So many articles written about these kinds of horror stories, they just strip out that entire history. They don't even talk about it, right? So did you know project management was perfected in the 50s for military action? There was project management for the Holocaust, for the Vietnam War. There are people right now managing the war on Ukraine. We use this to optimize the creation of the atomic bomb from the Manhattan Project. And now we're seeing maximizing efficiency of Amazon warehouse workers and delivery drivers, right? We're limiting their movements, and we're also limiting their bathroom breaks, which they also deny. So this is serious, it's happening. And I think we want to take this knowledge and we want to reframe it. We want to be empowered by this, right? Not feel like, oh my goodness, there's nothing we can do. Like Rachel just told me all this stuff, but there's nothing we can do. That is blatantly false. We're going to totally be able to change some of these systems. And it's going to be in the most like unexpected way possible through stuff you already do every single day. And I think this is where I want to do a little bit of a flip. So again, reminder, we spend most of our time at work. We have the most power at work to make change through that work because we have economic buying power, we participate in capitalism, we as project leaders influence process. So what is that about? Well, it's something all about consent, having agency, and building trust, right? We are in this place where we're moving towards more of a collective way of leadership. We're not relying as much on older systems that are going to take us down this really dark path where we have no autonomy and control. The Great Resignation was like one indicator that people are fed up with the way that things are. They're not happy at their jobs. They're not happy performing tasks and being monitored for tasks. So consent is about being actually asked what you think and what you want, and being given the opportunity to give it, not just having it manufactured for you. Agency is about having choice and power and autonomy and being able to show up and make decisions that impact your team. And of course, trust is working together and believing that not just your fellow colleagues, but your executives, your employers and managers, your clients, whoever you're working with has a fundamental sense of respect for you and will treat you with dignity and humanity, right? That's what this is about. So let's talk about what that can look like. Principles of a democratic society, right? Let's look at what this means. So leadership is accountable to the governed folks. Citizen participation is involved in decision making. We have the right to question our leaders. We have the right to dissent. We have the right for freedom of movement and liberty and individual expression. Now let's look at how current companies run. The principles of modern work. Well, we're accountable to a higher authority. Decision-making happens at the highest level of authority. Decisions are not reviewed by those who work for the leaders. There's compliance and uniformity, and all of the activities and interactions are closely defined, and we're told how we need to do those things, right? So how do we get there? We're gonna fight to death for democracy and government. So we're gonna fight to death for how to change our systems at work. Let's look at one way to do this. If we're talking about consent, and we're talking about agency, and we're talking about trust, what this is all about, a very simple phrase that you folks can take. This is from the Latin in 14th century democratic principles. Nothing about us without us. Nothing about us without us. If this impacts you, you get a voice. You get a voice, you get a veto, or you get a vote. And if we governed our companies and PM processes in a way that allowed us to have this conversation, nothing about us without us. Imagine how differently you would run your processes. Imagine how differently you would set up your project management tools and who would be allowed to see what work happens and when that work happens. Imagine how you would run your meetings and how you would estimate and scope. Right? Because if you use this idea, you can kind of take a look at the evolution of workplace democracy. You can kind of see a scale here from no employee participation, no power, no rights, all the way up from 1 all the way up to 10, where there's full power sharing among all organizational members. You can see that towards the left-hand side, that's where slavery sits, right? No participation, no power, no rights. Then we talked about scientific management. And now where you see this human relations management and human resource management, basically a good chunk of companies are running according to this approach right now. And really, more or less, it's benevolent dictatorship, right? Benevolent informal participation. Then we get into unionized companies, and then we also get into worker-owned companies. So a worker-owned company is where every single person gets a vote. Every person gets a voice, and and veto power comes with your vote. So there is definitely a change in the air. It's happening. You can feel it. Workers have more power. They are increasingly more worker movements, people saying, no, I don't want to be treated this way, and expected to kind of be available on demand. And let's look at what the impact of this actually is then. For folks that are moving towards a more democratic workplace, the proof is in. I just looked it up. Not only are organizations more resilient, more environmentally responsible, have lower turnover, and have the same or higher productivity, but they actually grow 2% faster than the average corporation. And they're sustainable. They last longer. They ride out pandemics and major calamities in the environment. Employees, there's lower pay inequality, there's higher life satisfaction, they're less alienated, and they feel more connected and stable in their employment. So the evidence shows a democratically run organization is one that is going to last longer, and you're going to be happier. So now let's turn this over to the next piece here. This is where we're going to start doing an activity. The work is that the ultimate hidden truth of the world, we designed this thing. We made this thing. And so we could just as easily make it different. So let's just do a quick example. Let's think about brainstorming a healthier PM future. Let's start with, let's use estimating as an example, okay? So if we were thinking about estimation, we were kind of using like, all right, through the eyes of scientific management, AKA maybe a lot of the ways that you folks currently are estimating your projects. I hate to say it, but a lot of us are still stuck using a lot of these same principles and processes. Let's say the old way of estimating. So if you're a professional service company, you do client work, you might have a salesperson, or maybe you have a PM, a lead PM or a director of some level, estimating alone. Maybe you also have a subject matter expert involved in that. Oftentimes you're reducing those estimates just so that they fit someone's expectations, usually a client's expectations or an executive's expectations, faster, better, cheaper, that kind of stuff. And we often see that firefighters dictate the speed of whatever work happens, right? So firefighters are the folks in your company where they are often assigned to fix problems. They come in, they put out the fires. They're good at it. They do it a lot. And they often get called in and they reset our baseline for what is healthy and what is not healthy. So when we're estimating, if your firefighter is estimating, they're not estimating accurately. They're estimating according to being under a lot of pressure and having to do things in a way that is not sustainable at all, right? And of course, when you have these faulty baselines, it creates a sense of commoditized labor. So now all the work we're doing is being driven down to be cheaper, faster, and I mean, hopefully better, but honestly, we're sacrificing, right? Take a look at the golden triangle. You get two of those sides. What's the third that's going to give? But if we started to look at estimation from a more democratic approach, so we would say anyone who does the work estimates the work, period. If you're going to work on the thing, you estimate the thing. If you're going to try to sell the work in advance, you're going to sell a range. You're not going to try to sell the final price of anything because you literally don't know what that is until you have people have the time to sit down and develop the requirements and look at the actual specs of what you're building, right? So estimates would then be more informed, and they wouldn't just be one number, because now we would actually start thinking about all the people that needed to be involved. You might have junior folks, you might have mid-level folks, you might have subject matter experts, you might have seniors involved, right? Those skill levels are all important. They're all relevant. They're all valid to that conversation, because you know, if you've ever worked with developers, if one developer estimates work on behalf of another and they don't communicate about the amount of work or the assumptions going into that work, you're going to have radically different estimates, right? And so when we give our teams a voice, a veto, or a vote, that changes the nature of how we show up. So we're using project management, the stuff we all do every single day, and we're flipping the lens a little bit so that we're saying, instead of having just one voice or just a couple voices make a decision, nothing about us without us. That's it. Nothing about us without us. So this is where I'm going to actually turn it over to you folks. And I'm going to ask if Kenny can share a link with you. And it is going to be an exercise where we're all going to be typing in stuff together, because nothing about us without us. So we're going to try this and see if we can break Google.
That's our goal for today. Break Google.
That's our goal, break Google. Okay, so you're going to notice that I'm taking you over to a document. Oh my goodness, a document called The Dark History of PM. And there's a little bit of setup here at the very beginning, but basically the call to action is we have the power to demand and make change. So as you get in, I know everyone's joining, take a minute. Okay, so I just have 4 questions, and we're going to spend as much or as little time on these questions as you folks need. And I think that depending on what kind of engagement we get, we could really go deep on this stuff. So number 1, the first question I want you to start thinking about is just think about your happiness level at work. Think about your sense of power, your sense of autonomy, consent, your agency, all of those kind of core ideas. Think about the things in your company or your organization, or if you're like uncomfortable talking about your org, that's fine. Psychological safety, talk about orgs in general. But what kinds of practices might mirror the scientific management approach that was developed as an evolution to employee surveillance and control designed for slavery? So, for example, time tracking, utilization metrics, not being given enough time to do the work, not including the right voices. I want you to go wild here and just start writing down as many ideas as you can. Don't worry about how much space this is taking. It's all there for you. You should all have edit access. Start typing all of the things that you think are related to your organization or organizations in general. And you can frame them through the lens of the PM functions that are still up on the screen.
There's a question about anonymous. It's really your call. If you want to use your Google accounts, then we can see you. If you would prefer to stay anonymous, that's what it is. Yeah.
I think only if you're logged in, but it has it's edit access for all, so it should be anonymous by default. And thank you for asking that. Yeah, and you don't have to put your names in there at all. I think a lot of that is like, creating enough safety to even feel like you could say that, right? Like, oh, this is what my organization's doing. And recognizing like most of our orgs are doing this. Most of them are still thinking about getting work done and project management through the lens of time, scope, budget, not seeing it about the human stuff at all. And we're not doing it, again, we're not doing it on purpose. We're doing it because the system was designed without humans in mind.
It's just like so fascinating to see the typing. I'm just like watching.
Yeah. So anonymous turtle, if you can move your item, you can put it at the very top of the number 1 if you want, but just to keep it inside the, yeah, there's some great stuff coming in here. Sales and business development, doing the estimation. Yep. Can you fit one more project in? This is often the stuff that makes people leave, if you think about it, like if you've left a job recently or you're thinking about quitting, this is stuff that, it just makes it irreparable if you can't fix it, if you don't feel like you have power to change it. How's the breaking Google going, by the way? I haven't demoed this with this many people. Is it working out?
Google's holding up, looks like.
Good. It's like they plan for things like this. Weird.
Well, they had 2 years to figure it out.
Right. Think of the horror stories you've heard from other people. I think the worst one I ever heard was there was not only no policy for women who were who had children and needed to have care facilities at work and maternity leave in general, but I think I knew a woman who was put in the bike rack room to breastfeed, and people would come in regularly to get their bikes out of the bike room. And I was just like, my mind was blown. I was like, granted, it's not project management related, but it is something around process and environment, right? Like it's a lack of consideration for how we set up our policy. So if you want to get outside of PM, you can, but I also want to see what power do we have in our roles right now.
There's like this, the TV show Superstore goes into that.
Yeah.
Like, I think they do a really good job of like the modern The Office, and yeah, she also breastfeeds in
Yeah,
the closet.
it doesn't, I think, I could be wrong about this, Trav, maybe you remember, but is it banned in the US, or it's not on Amazon anyway in the US? Is that right, Trav? Oh, sorry. The show Superstore.
Oh, it's banned.
It's on Netflix.
Oh, I thought it was not show. I thought it didn't show up in the US. Maybe we have US folks who could confirm that if they've seen it. It's a good show.
We have a very specific question in chat as well. How do you apply this concept of democratic estimation to bid on fixed fee gov projects that compete for stringent budgets and delivery goals? I mean,
that's huge, right? Like, think about that. What system is our government operating under then? If it's like, nope, spec work is great, and we need to know to the dollar, you better send this, like we're gonna have 10 different people competing for the same project. Like, that's pretty wild. I would love to say, yeah, like if you bid too low, you're gonna lose money for sure. And so I think part of it is looking at, if you're gonna work with the government, what educational opportunities do we have to inform new policies? I forget, there's an initiative through the design, what is it called? Is it RWDI or something? We have a Canadian association that is for design, and a good friend of ours is trying to get the government to stop using spec work, like stop getting people to send you free samples.
sorry, what is, spec?
Yeah, so free mock-ups and free designs and free prototypes. Pretty wild.
I mean, that's what I was gonna say. Like, at some point, this is where I think we're also seeing, agencies saying no to customers and saying no to clients. And I think that's, it's not always customer gets what they want, right? Like, I think it's part of this shift that we're seeing.
Yeah, you're right. And I think so, what speaks to that. So those of you who are working again in government that's different, or in like a internal companies, product side companies, this might not be the case for you, but you're seeing the results. So folks that are working in digital agencies, like agencies are having to drive their prices up. Like, I think it's like 15, 20, 25%, because salaries need to go up by 15, 20, 25%. Otherwise they can't retain their staff. And so there is this thing that's changing where like smaller digital agencies, they just don't have the clout because they cannot afford to pay their workers as much as the market's demanding, right? And so part of that is like looking at like, how do we support small business staying in business, and supporting, like not just having all of our talent leached into large product companies who could pay $200,000, $300,000 salaries, right? And we have to get crafty about that. We have to get like really support, Louder Than 10, we're transforming into a worker-owned cooperative, so we can actually dictate our own pricing. We can set our rates. We're not a digital agency, we're a training company, but still, like, what power do we have to create safety for folks, especially juniors, to grow, instead of being like, here's a job description, you're a junior, you have to have 3 years of experience. I'm sorry, that's bullshit. 3 years of experience as a junior? What's before that? Like, oh, high school, you should also have 1 year of experience. Like, it's wild, right? So we've set this up and can dismantle it.
I mean, yeah, I was gonna say, like, back in my day, I've been coordinating it's like all like as a student, but that was like the only way to get, that
right
before you start your work, like team
internships.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
These unpaid internships are no longer really a thing. Like, we made some steps.
Yeah. I think we're getting there. There's slow movement, but it's I'd love to see leaps and bounds with this, because I think that's the thing is like this whole thing. B Corps, RAF, that's for sure. This whole thing is, the companies can run sustainably. They can. They maybe can't like run and be as big as Amazon or Google in that sustainability. But then again, like sizes of companies that big, like what is that growth trajectory? And is that how much a part of those larger entities do we want to be if we don't get autonomy, if we don't get a say, if we're constantly surveilled, right? I'm not saying don't go work for Google. Am I? Maybe.
I don't know what
Your choice.
We're saying don't work at all.
Don't work at all. Do the thing where you're napping as an act of radical resistance.
Quit all your jobs and quit all your.
But in all seriousness, I think that there are some fantastic ideas coming out of these conversations. So I think what I want to do, Rutika, how are we doing for time?
We're at 6:23.
Okay. And I'm good for a little bit, right? I've got
another 20-30 minutes.
Oh yeah. Okay, great. So let's kind of take a look at this. Look down the list. If you're running out of ideas, just take a quick peek. If you're really running out of ideas, we've actually got at the bottom in the resources section on top of page 3, you can actually see the first link there. You can click on that and it should take you to a whole page full of democracy and PM and operations ideas. I'll walk through the rest of those resources in a bit, but basically the top resource will be really handy for you. I'll give you like another minute or two just because people are still writing.
You've opened the floodgates. It's like,
yeah. Oh, there's so many good ideas in here, team.
So we're not going down to 2 yet, right? We're still at 1.
Yeah, we're just gonna start 2, but it sounds like folks are really gearing up for this. So maybe we should just do 2. Okay, finish number 1. And now let's actually look at different ways that we can make change. So using the concept, nothing about us without us, right? Nothing should happen without us if it impacts us. Then see if you can brainstorm a list of all the ways that you could make each function of project management, or if maybe your sort of relationship is maybe more director role or executive role, and maybe you're more ops than PM, then like focus on whatever you do best, because there are definitely overlaps, and you can do a lot when folks are all connected together with these ideas. So what are the things that you could do to make each function that you've mentioned better? And if we have time, I'll circle back on some of these and see if we can have a little conversation. It's wild because, you look at some of the items that we're listing and the practicality of them. I mean, it's so practical, right? The items are so practical, right? And so it's like, why wouldn't we do some of these things? Why wouldn't we do most of these things? And I think a part of it is an education process, because not most, I'll say many, I'll say many to be fair. Many of the folks that I know who run digital companies and beyond that, they actually don't know the function of PM. They really don't. They restrict it to just time, scope, budget. They think about it as moving A to B. But really, if you zoom out, like your role, you're smoothing out cash flow, you're reducing risk, but you can reduce risk in a way that's safe and not harmful, right? You are keeping an eye on future trends. You're paying attention to what changes are happening in technology. You are the person that knows how your team is doing, even if you're not their manager. Every day, you talk with them. Every day, they're communicating with you about how they're feeling, or hopefully they are, how much workload they're actually getting. You have power and you should have autonomy to be able to choose how much work those PMs or that project team is actually taking on. Like by definition, that should be your right? To help the project be successful. You're accountable for that. So you need to give people the autonomy to be able to say, I can't work anymore on these things. This is too much work. We're moving too fast.
My PM brain just wants to organize everything.
So tempting, right?
No, I'm like, can I color code? No.
we can, I don't know how this will work, because as soon as you start reorging, it's like, who's clicking on what, but we will distill it down in number 3. So. No, there's like local companies that are talking about like selling their companies to the rest of their workers, because it's like they're burnt out. They don't want to do it anymore, but they don't want to just give it to a stranger, right? And folks who are like interested in purchasing that, one or two people might not be able to afford it, right? Like a small to medium sized company. But if you put like 5 to 7 or 10 people or 20 people together, like you can buy a company. It's pretty wild.
So that's what we're doing after this.
We're buying we're buying Google.
Guys!
All of us put our heads together. Awesome. So it looks like people are still going ahead. But I think what I want to do now is I kind of want to highlight a few of these ideas. So I'm going to come back to the first question, because I think this will frame some of the issues. Okay, so some of the things that you folks are noticing in your org, or maybe in other orgs, keystroke and click tracking. So this is getting wild, right? You are probably maybe working remotely in your own home, on your own maybe computer at times, and you are having to have technology track and surveil your moves that may or may not be outside of your own work commitments. That's wild. Like that is some hardcore shit, right? Working weekends or after hours, having a fixed schedule, time tracking in general, billable hours. Yeah, absolutely. I rage against utilization metrics, because I just see like the whole thing with Henry Gantt, the whole thing with like, get your billable hours up, get your billable hours up. It's like, if we're trying to come together and we're looking at like the health of our companies, and we know that to get to a certain amount of money we need to make every month, it's either, yes, you could track hours and squeeze out every ounce of that time, or we can all think about those critical drivers and critical metrics that can move the company. You can do a lot by just like having conversations, teaching your team how to like upsell accounts, how to, how to support more alignment, and train if you do work with clients, train your clients or train your teams up on these different processes. Yes, let's see. So sales and biz development, doing estimation. I think I see this is like an 80-20 problem. Like I see it in 80% of the companies that come to us for training. I also see it as an 80-20 problem, where most of that work that happens in sales ends up translating. It's like 20% of the work happens up front and ends up causing 80% of the problem downstream. Not showing how money works in the company. Like just thinking about this, do you know how much your company is making every quarter and every year? Do you know like what that means to you? Because if you understand like, oh, my company can't hire right now, or they can't do raises right now because they're literally not making enough, but they're not saying, and sorry, there's nothing you can do, but they're reframing that as, what can we do together to actually change that? Then everyone actually does support the cause a little bit more. Just that whole, pushing projects to fill the capacity. Working when sick is wild to me. We're like, people are dying from COVID and we're still like, oh, just keep working, keep on. The fact is, from now on, project managers, when you're setting up your resourcing budgets, you're going to have to buffer in like 20 to 30% extra, because until we know that the pandemic is done, which I don't will it ever, people are going to continue to get sick. It's just a fact of life now, right? So we have to build that buffer and that softness in, so that we're actually thinking about our humans instead of thinking about just sticking to a timeline that is completely unrealistic. Sorry, I'm getting on a bit of, I get a little bit of a rant because I get very like upset and heated about this stuff. Oh yeah, like highlighting certain people in the company that always do well, and then those folks who do well are just like they're given the instead of given a promotion or title change, it's like, here, have more because you like doing it and you do so much. Do you want more? And sometimes we don't know how to say no, or we can't say no. Yeah, breaks and interruptions, totally. Like, when do we actually have time to talk to people anymore as like a fellow colleague and ask them how their day's going without feeling like that's on the clock, right?
Yeah, a lot of like boundary type of conversations around, like, especially because we're working at home now. So there is no boundary of working.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're totally committed, full on, right? Ritika, for you, was there any other ones that as we go down the list that were popping up that you were kind of passionate about?
Oh gosh. I'm ready to start a farm. Just kidding. Yeah, I feel like boundaries is definitely a thing. Time tracking. Yeah, all of these things.
Yeah, absolutely. It does feel like there's some themes though, for sure, right? It's like too much work, not enough freedom, not enough consent, like just not being brought in and being asked what people want. Like, even when a change, like a policy is being rolled out in your company, what's the policy for notifying people and making them not freak out because you just totally changed something on them, right? All of these things can translate into project management related systems changes. Not all of them, but like many of them.
Well, I was just gonna say, even like the favoritism part, right? Like racism technically is
Yes.
over, but you know,
Yep.
we all have subconscious bias. We all,
Yeah.
our world is global. Like part of it is, yeah, I think that definitely plays into some of our workplace dynamics, like those subconscious bias.
Yeah, I think, Ritika, you totally hit that on the head. One of the other resources I have at the bottom, which you folks could check out later, is, let's see, which one is it? It's called White Supremacy Culture by Tema Okun. And if you go and check it out, it's like the, what is it? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8,
We can,
ninth link. But it's really interesting because it talks about so many of the values that we have at work and how toxic these values are. Like, PMs are some of the most, like, we've been conditioned to be like, perfection, write it all down. First try is the only try you get. Do not make mistakes. I have to do it because no one else can do it. It's wild. Like, all of that stuff is actually wired into these systems of oppression that we've been sort of, our works environments have been modeled on.
I like that some people are putting their own resources, like definitely.
Good stuff. Yes, please, please, please. I know this is like just the beginning, right?
Just
Thank
not
you so
that.
much for contributing.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got some really powerful discussion around observations of things that you're noticing in the organization. I think too, like we've got a number of people here, but I'm also totally fine. Like, if you folks want to kind of take a look at the list for what are some ways that we can be more democratic in project management. Does anyone want to kind of like, we're sort of honing in and focusing. Maybe we could start putting like, well, this might work, this might backfire totally. I was thinking we could put a star beside the ones that really speak to us and then be like, whoa, there's a lot of stars. But maybe there's a way that you could put like some sort of emoji or icon or something that like really speaks to you about some of the items on this list. And let's just see as folks pop up which ones, like asterisks can work. What do you think, right?
Yeah, I was thinking maybe you put an asterisk in the beginning so that, and then we can like just prioritize. So we'll just put an asterisk in front of the dot, like for each thing. Try to,
yeah,
maybe I can share my screen as an example. But yeah, just put asterisks so that we know. And yeah, we had to like cater this event from up to how many of our people came. So
totally.
yeah, just use the asterisk, put it wherever you feel strongly, or if you can like, just like a plus thumbs up essentially.
Yeah, I learned a shortcut on my keyboard for adding emojis, but I don't know if it works for everybody all the time. And it was supposed to be Command Control Space, but Anyone else got it one that works? Now it's doing spotlight instead of that.
Yeah, something like that, Rachel. Yeah, it's like
What was that one?
it's the thing that brings up the keyboard emojis. Hold on.
Yeah.
Oh, I like the fixed schedule 9 to 5. Even that.
What's that?
There's like, I see there's 2 asterisks for the fixed schedule 9 to 5. That's an interesting one.
Yeah, no kidding. Hey.
2 asterisks for making new employees negotiate for wages. Yeah, just add your asterisks to the one so then it'll be a nice visual of.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I think that's it, right? Like if you work in a company, you have no idea what the salary bands are, and you don't know where you sit in the salary bands because there's no rubric to even assess, like, are you actually doing the skills and like, are you meeting the skills and the behaviors that are required in that role, in that position, in your job? Like, you're just kind of, you're like, I don't know, like, how do I'm a great PM, but I don't know if I'm junior or mid-level or senior. Like, it's really tough to know what power do I have to make change that would help me to get a raise, but also would help generate revenue for the company. And again, I'm not really thinking about not-for-profits here. Apologies, I am not considering them. That's my history is more in the other side. But like, for every person hired at a company, you have to usually have starting like a 2-to-1 ratio for a billable person to a non-billable person, just to support enough revenue. And the revenue that needs to be generated for that person needs to be double the salary of that person there, at least, just to cover that person working at the company. So imagine if everyone knew those things and they were like, oh yeah, if I want a $10,000 raise, then that means at least I need to be able to have a business case for minimum $20,000 of revenue, but not to mention that also means like double my salary to support benefits, vacation, et cetera, right? Like, imagine if you had that knowledge and power to be able to go back and be like, oh, I get it. Like, this is either possible or not possible.
Yeah, I feel like even, I think we share a lot of job descriptions on Slack, and, as we've evolved in our community, we are now trying to not post any job descriptions without a salary in it.
Yeah.
And that's like a small step we're starting to take in the last little bit. So
Yeah, absolutely. I just want to point out Raphael's comment. He said nonprofits can be just as problematic because there's still projects to be managed, and it can often be worse since you allow more bad things for a cause. And I absolutely 100% agree with you. I find it remarkable because, like, you think about it, like a not-for-profit, they're not generating margins. They're whatever is like expense line and revenue is equal. So they're basically, they've already got money set aside for salaries. They got money set aside for ops and other initiatives. That is like pre-allocated. And I always find that interesting that there's not enough money for salaries, especially for larger not-for-profits, because I'm like, when you go to, like, I forget there's like sites for this to evaluate and vet, like, where's the money going? It's like, it's still going all up, right? And so the workers are not getting the same amount. It's just flowing up, or it's being spent in weird ways. Not all the time. I don't want to like make a broad stroke there, but you're right in that you have to have critical discourse about that. Yeah, and competing for grants for sure.
okay, I think so. We're at 6:40 and we have 2 more questions. I think what might be good so we can get some engagement is I'll stop recording. And then we can kind of open this up a little bit if people want to speak up, that because I understand. So I'm going to stop recording.